Kyle, thank you for taking a few minutes out of the busiest man, the hardest working man in the hedge fund world.
Oh, please.
You are everywhere. You're in Asia 2 weeks. We're sitting here. The IMF just asked you to come speak to their staff. We started with the subprime world. You nailed that. You got the Europe call right. Quantitative easing. I say that. What springs into your mind?
I think the competitive devaluations right away. And I think that when we think about this brotherhood of central bankers, it's the biggest mutual admiration society in the world. And it's how they self-describe it behind closed doors. And so even if it's the beggar thy neighbor policy, and even if, well, first of all, as a policy, no central bank can have it as an outward policy to devalue their currency. It may be a second or third derivative of another policy that they're engaging in to encourage price stability and inflation, but clearly it is a full currency, as Muhammad put it, tension, or currency war, as Rickards puts it, or however you want to look at this. The bottom line is when the globe is at 360% credit market debt to GDP, and there's no real way out. And as we see today, the winds of austerity have already blown. We're already moving back into a more Krugman-esque policy of let's just keep going.
The Krugmanites hate the concept of austerity.
And slow growth. Right? I think Dennis Miller said it best when he said he's never met a born-again Christian on their prom night. Yeah. Right? What he meant was, when you're drawing an analogy to austerity, I think none of these countries engaged in austerity because prospectively because they thought it was a good idea. It was after the bond market called them out and they had a crisis that they had to magically find austerity and engage in it.
Well, austerity is not a punishment; it's a consequence.
Yeah. Yeah, it's shocking. And I think the political will to engage in austerity is already gone. And it's interesting, if there's no consequence for fiscal profligacy, then why would you ever change? As a politician, why would you ever change the manner in which you operate? And that's where we are in the U.S. today. It's where we're headed for the rest of the world. And then therefore, if that's the game plan, then I think you and I know how this plays out.
I'm going to toss one up. We'll see what the surprise is. I think the U.S. has a path out if we make the proper political decisions.
And you know when that happens? On the 12th of never.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
I agree with you. The numbers suggest that we have. So first of all, you must be talking about on-balance sheet obligations and not contingent liabilities.
Correct.
Right.
Eventually, we have to solve. I mean, we've got the first problem, and then we have the second problem.
Look, our debts are not even 5 times our central government tax revenue yet. We're still in a zone of solvency on balance sheet. Now, off balance sheet, we can argue that till we turn blue. We probably don't even want to talk about that. No. But on balance sheet, you're right.
Let's talk about the surprise that happened in Japan. Not a surprise to you, but for some of us, Japan surprised me by surprising us. They were the most boring central bank for 2 decades. They never surprised. They never exceeded or were less than their expectations. And they showed up. This is the most aggressive monetary policy from a major central bank that I can see.
Yeah, I think when you look at what Kuroda and Abenomics has done and what they've laid out as their kind of framework for trying to eradicate Japan from this deflation it's been mired in for the better part of the last 2 decades, they're talking about doubling a monetary base in less than 2 years. They're talking about monetizing the entire curve and every bond they sell to, I guess, make up for their 11% fiscal deficit in the next 2 years. They're saying, we're doing it all. I think it's their last-ditch effort to try to not implode under the weight of their own debt. What's interesting is it's way too late, and now they may force themselves to explode with the fuse they're lighting under this regime.
One last quick question, Kyle. Mm-hmm. The average investor, what does he do?
Oh, God.
Is that bad? Oh, God.
Yeah.
Do you praise?
I get asked that question often. I'm sure you do too. The answer is I don't know. I invest in an absolute return portfolio where I think very carefully about downside versus upside. I fear losing more than I have a desire to win and earn and make money. And so the average investor, I think, is at the mercy of the central bank puppeteers, and they're being forced to buy high-yielding equities vis-a-vis their alternative, which is very low-yielding treasuries. I think they're being forced to put their money in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I think there'll be consequences for that. So I think the average investor needs to be really careful doing what the central bankers want them to do.
Kyle, thank you for being here. I really appreciate the time and your friendship. Next time in Dallas.
Thank you, John.